The notification for a $3 million villa purchase flashed on my son's phone at exactly 10:47 a.m. By noon, my phone was buzzing like a beehive. By evening, I had become the most talked about woman in Boston, and all it took was shattering my family's expectations. 3 days earlier, it was March 15th, my 64th birthday, the same day it has been every single year. But somehow, my son Daniel and his lovely wife Claire managed to overlook it once again. How convenient that it always collided with their annual spring getaway, a tradition that happened to fall around Claire's mother, Patricia Harris's birthday on March 12th. I had pieced together their little dance years ago. For 5 years straight, my special day had been quietly erased, covered by Patricia's so-called emergencies and celebrations. This year, though, I made a different choice. I didn't hint, didn't remind, didn't send a single text begging them to keep the weekend free. Instead, I simply smiled as they packed their bags for a spa retreat in Vermont. The moment their car disappeared from my driveway, I picked up the phone and called my real estate agent. "Carolyn," I told her, "find me the most breathtaking waterfront property you can. Money is no object." She thought I was joking until 4 hours later when we stood inside the marble foyer of a modern villa overlooking the Atlantic Dot. It was magnificent. Floor-to-ceiling windows opening to endless waves, a kitchen that gleamed like it belonged in a magazine, a master suite with a private fireplace, and a deck that made you feel like you were floating above the ocean. Carolyn hesitated as she whispered the price, $3.2 million, like she was delivering bad news. "I'll take it," I said without a second thought. "Don't you want to think about it? Maybe discuss it with your family?" She asked. I almost laughed. When was the last time my family discussed anything with me? I've been thinking for 64 years. Wire the funds tomorrow. By Wednesday, the deed carried my name. By Thursday morning, I was posting photos across every platform. I could still remember the passwords for the ocean view from the living room, the champagne I poured for myself. In the new kitchen, the candlelit dinner I enjoyed on the deck with food from the most expensive restaurant in town. My caption was short and sharp: "Birthday celebration at my new home." Sometimes the best gifts are the ones you give yourself. And that was when the storm began. The first call came from Daniel at 10:52 a.m., barely 5 minutes after the bank alert had pinged his phone. For years, ever since my husband passed away, he had quietly placed himself as a joint account holder, monitoring my finances under the excuse of protection. He liked to believe he was keeping me safe from foolish decisions. How thoughtful. When I let his call go to voicemail, Claire tried next, then Patricia, then Daniel again. By 2 p.m., I had 17 missed calls and a string of frantic texts, some pretending to be concerned, others barely hiding their panic. My favorite was Claire's message: "Mom Anderson, we're worried about you. This isn't like you. Please call us back. Isn't like me." That woman had no idea who I really was. She only knew the version of me that bent over backward to make everyone else comfortable, but that version no longer existed. Today, they were meeting Rebecca Anderson, homeowner, independent woman, and someone who refused to stay invisible any longer. As I unpacked a few precious belongings, my mother's china, the quilt from my wedding, family albums that told stories no one else seemed to care about. I smiled each time the phone rang. 23 missed calls by dinner, yet not one of them had ever remembered my birthday without me begging for attention. This year, I had given myself the only gift I wanted, freedom. By Friday morning, as the sunlight streamed through the glass walls of my new villa, the calls had turned desperate. Daniel's name flashed across my screen again and again, followed by Claire, then Patricia, then even distant relatives I hadn't spoken to in years. They all wanted an explanation, but none of them had bothered to ask me about my life in over a decade. What none of them knew, what not one of them had even thought to ask about in the 5 years since my husband's passing, was Aunt Eleanor's inheritance. Sweet, unmarried Aunt Eleanor, who had lived alone in her Boston brownstone and collected rare jewelry. The same Aunt Daniel and Claire had met exactly twice and dismissed as irrelevant. When she died last September, she left her entire estate to me, her only niece who had bothered to visit her regularly, $7.3 million. After taxes and fees, I was still left with more than enough to build a new life on my own terms. And that was exactly what I intended to do. I poured myself a glass of wine from the new fridge and carried it out to the deck. The ocean stretched endlessly before me, mine to claim now, mine to enjoy. For 6 years, my birthday had been treated as an inconvenience, a date that always seemed to clash with Patricia's sudden illnesses or surprise celebrations. For 6 years, I had been left with excuses, empty promises, and store-bought cakes I cut alone at my kitchen table. The first year had been understandable, or so I told myself. Patricia broke her hip just 3 days before my birthday. Daniel and Claire rushed to Vermont to help. They swore we would celebrate when they returned. But by the time they came back, it was Easter, then spring cleaning, then summer. My birthday was simply erased. The second year, Patricia had a supposed heart scare that turned out to be nothing but too much coffee. Still, off they went, leaving me with a grocery cake and another empty promise. Years 3 and 4 followed the same pattern. New excuses, same results. But it was year 5 that tore away the mask. I had driven to the grocery store the day after my birthday, feeling pathetic when I saw them through a cafe window. Daniel, Claire, and Patricia laughing and raising champagne glasses at a downtown bistro. This one day after I had received a hasty text claiming Patricia was bedridden. I sat in my car for 20 minutes, watching my son celebrate another woman's life while I was left to wonder if I had become invisible in my own family. That was the day I understood the truth. This wasn't coincidence. It was choice. Patricia had claimed March as hers, and Daniel had chosen to keep his wife happy rather than honor his own mother. So when March rolled around again this year, I made a choice too. Silence, no reminders. No hints, just freedom. And when they drove away with guilty faces, I called my agent Carolyn and bought myself the villa of my dreams. Now, as the sun dipped lower over the Atlantic and the waves glowed with fire, my phone buzzed yet again. This time, I answered ... Mom, thank God. Where are you? What's going on? Caroline from Coastal Realty said you bought a house. A $3.2 million house. I smiled into the receiver. I did indeed, Daniel. It's lovely. Waterfront. Just as I always wanted. There was silence, then his voice dropped. Mom, are you feeling all right? This isn't like you. There it was again, that phrase. Isn't like you. I'm feeling wonderful, I said calmly, watching a sailboat glide across the water. Better than I have in years. How's Patricia's birthday trip going? Another pause. He stammered about the house, about finances, about how reckless this all was, but I only smiled. Because for the first time in decades, I wasn't the fragile widow who needed permission to exist. I was Rebecca Anderson, owner of my own destiny, and this time, the story was mine to tell. Saturday morning, Daniel arrived at my villa looking like he had driven through the night. His shirt was wrinkled, his eyes were bloodshot, and his expression carried a mix of panic and anger. He didn't even bother with greetings. We need to talk, he said the moment I opened the door. Good morning to you too, sweetheart. I replied smoothly, come in, I'll make coffee. He followed me through the grand marble foyer into the kitchen. His eyes darted across every corner, cataloging the house as if it were evidence of a crime. The stainless steel coffee machine gleamed as I measured the ground slowly, refusing to rush. "Mom, this is insane," he burst out. "You can't just buy a $3 million house without consulting anyone. What were you thinking?" I looked him straight in the eye. "I was thinking that I'm a grown woman with my own money and I wanted a house." "Would you like cream in your coffee?" "Don't be flippant. This is serious. Do you have any idea how much the property tax is?" "A loan will cost you 32,000 annually," I said calmly, pouring the steaming coffee into 2 cups. "Already budgeted for?" His jaw dropped. "How could you possibly budget for that?" "Mom, Dad's life insurance wasn't enough for something like this. Even with your savings and Social Security, you can't afford this kind of commitment." And there it was. The assumption he had been carrying for years, that I was weak, fragile, incapable of managing my own affairs. I placed his cup in front of him and leaned across the kitchen island. "Daniel, when was the last time you actually looked at my bank statements? Not just monitored alerts for suspicious transactions, but truly looked?" He shifted uncomfortably. "I keep an eye on things to protect you from scams or poor decisions." "To protect me," I repeated with a cold smile. "What you've been doing is watching my spending without knowing a single thing about my income." "What does that mean?" "It means I'm not the helpless widow you've been treating me as. I inherited $7.3 million from Aunt Eleanor." The coffee cup froze in his hand. "What? She passed last September. She left me everything. Her brownstone, her investments, her art collection. After taxes, over $7 million. That's impossible. Aunt Eleanor was just..." "She was nobody. She worked for an insurance company. She was vice president of that company for 20 years. She owned prime property in Boston. She made brilliant investments. But you wouldn't know that, Daniel, because you never bothered to truly know her." His hands trembled as he set the cup down. "$7 million, and you didn't tell me? Why would I? You've spent the past 5 years treating me like a child who can't be trusted to buy groceries without supervision. Why would I share something so personal with someone who doesn't respect me?" His face turned red the way it used to when I caught him lying as a teenager. "I was trying to help. Claire said seniors often make poor financial choices. She thought you could manage me better if you treated me like I was incompetent, and you agreed." "That's not true." "Oh, it is true," I said firmly. "You've monitored every purchase over $500. You simplified my phone plan because you thought technology was too confusing for someone my age. You forced me into joint accounts so you could keep control. Don't stand there and tell me you weren't trying to manage me, Daniel. You've been controlling me for years." He sat back in silence, staring at the waves glinting outside the glass wall. I waited, sipping my coffee. After 38 years of being his mother, I knew when to let him think. Finally, he spoke. "Why didn't you tell me about the inheritance?" "Because I wanted to see how you would react to me making a decision without your approval. And you reacted exactly as I expected, with panic and anger. You assumed I couldn't possibly know what I was doing." "I'm not angry," he said softly, though his shaking voice betrayed him. "I'm concerned. This house. It's not you. It's too big, too expensive, too flashy." "Too flashy for what?" "For a widow who's supposed to fade quietly into the background. For a mother who should be grateful for scraps of attention." His silence was the only answer I needed. "Tell me, Daniel," I pressed. "When was the last time you asked me what I wanted? When was the last time you treated me like a person with dreams of her own instead of a burden to be managed?" He finally met my eyes. For the first time since he arrived, he didn't look like a financial advisor delivering bad news. He looked like my son, realizing he had underestimated his own mother. "This is really what you want?" he asked quietly, This is exactly what I want. He exhaled slowly, defeated. Then I guess we'll figure out how to make it work. It wasn't full approval, but it was a start. And for me, that was enough. Monday morning at exactly 8 a.m., my front doorbell rang. I opened it to find Claire and her mother, Patricia Harris, standing there like soldiers on a mission. Patricia clutched a folder thick with papers, while Claire carried a stack of glossy brochures. Their faces carried the same expression-tight smiles, hiding sharp disapproval. Patricia stepped inside first, glancing around the marble foyer as if she were appraising a crime scene. "Well," she sniffed, "it certainly is large." "Good. Morning to you too, Patricia," I said, my voice calm. "Claire, come in. I'll put on some coffee." They followed me into the kitchen, their eyes scanning every detail: the imported tiles, the gleaming appliances, the panoramic ocean view that cost more per square foot than Patricia's entire house. Patricia settled herself at the island, folding her hands with the authority of a woman used to controlling every room she entered. "Rebecca, we need to discuss what's really going on here." "What's going on?" I said lightly, setting mugs on the counter. "Is that I bought a house. Would you like cream with your coffee?" "Don't be dismissive," Patricia shot back. She pulled open her folder, revealing a neatly organized presentation. "This purchase represents several concerning patterns of behavior. Claire and I have been discussing them." Of course they had. My daughter-in-law and her mother analyzing me as if I were a case study in poor judgment. Claire jumped in quickly. Her tone rehearsed secrecy about major financial changes, impulsive decision-making, withdrawal from family activities, and now this purchase that seems more about proving a point than meeting your needs. I raised an eyebrow. "And what point do you think I'm trying to prove?" Patricia leaned forward, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "That you don't need family input. That you're still capable of managing finances. That you're not ready for a guided living situation." I nearly laughed. Guided living situation? Is that the new name for assisted living? Claire rushed to soften it. "Not assisted living, Mom Anderson. Age-appropriate housing. Communities with support systems." She spread the brochures. Across my countertop, smiling, silver-haired couples playing board games and doing water aerobics. Sunnybrook Senior Living. Golden Years Village. Heritage Oaks Community. "These are retirement villages," I said flatly. "They're active adult communities with excellent amenities," Claire insisted. Patricia and I reviewed several options before we came today. "How thoughtful of Patricia," I replied, coolly, researching my housing without ever asking what I wanted. Patricia's smile tightened. "Rebecca, Brian is worried about your judgment. Claire is exhausted trying to balance everything. Something has to change." "You're right," I said, my tone steady. "Something does need to change. The assumption that I require a committee to manage my life." Their faces flickered, clearly not expecting that answer. "I'm 64, not 94, I continued. "I have a degree, decades of business experience, and more money than most people dream of. I don't need Patricia Harris deciding where I live." Patricia's mask cracked. "Someone needs to provide perspective. You're obviously not thinking clearly. Because I bought a house you wouldn't have chosen for me? Because I refused to ask your permission?" Patricia pressed harder. "Because you're acting irresponsible. Your family depends on you. Being reasonable. They expect stability. They expect you to put their needs first." "Ah," I said softly, finally seeing the truth. "So this isn't about my safety. It's about your comfort." Claire's voice grew sharper. "It's about family. Families make decisions together. They don't just vanish for a weekend and come back owning million-dollar properties." I turned my eyes on her. "When you and Daniel bought your home, did you ask my opinion?" "That's different," she snapped. "How?" "Because you're our parent. We look to you for stability. And I've given you stability your entire adult lives. But stability doesn't mean I never change. Consistency doesn't mean I never grow. I'm not furniture, Claire. I'm a person with my own dreams. The silence that followed was sharp enough to cut glass. Finally, Patricia gathered her brochures, her face hard. Well, Rebecca, she said coldly, when this house becomes too much for you to handle, when independence turns into isolation, don't expect the family to pick up the pieces. I smiled, lifting my coffee. I wouldn't dream of it. As they stormed out, I stood in my beautiful kitchen, staring at the ocean through my spotless windows. Patricia was right about one thing: independence and happiness were not the same. But for the first time in years, I had the chance to find out what happiness looked like for me. And I would not surrender that chance to anyone. 2 weeks after Patricia's so-called intervention, I finally decided to tackle the old desk that had belonged to my late husband. I had avoided it for years, afraid of the memories packed away inside. But as I sorted through faded files and useless warranties, my hand brushed against a manila folder shoved deep in the back. The tab was marked in my husband's careful handwriting, Daniel, private. Curiosity prickled at me. I pulled it open and my world tilted. Inside were bank statements, loan applications, and legal documents that painted a picture of my son I could barely recognize. Credit card debt $47,000. A mortgage 3 months behind. And then the paper that froze me in place. A second mortgage on Daniel's house, co-signed under my name. Except the signature wasn't mine. He had forged it. My breath caught. The dates told an even uglier story. Every single financial crisis lined up with one of Patricia's mysterious health emergencies. Each time Daniel and Claire had rushed off to Vermont, each time my birthday had been postponed, Daniel's finances had been crumbling. And Patricia had been right there, absorbing all his attention. I felt sick. My son, the boy I raised. To be responsible and careful was drowning in debt and willing to steal my identity to keep his head above water. Was shaking hands. I picked up the phone and called Marcus Reed, the lawyer who had managed Aunt Eleanor's estate. Marcus, I said, my voice unsteady, I need you to run a credit check under my name. I think someone has been using my identity. 3 hours later, he called me back. His voice was grim. Rebecca, I have the full picture. Your credit score has dropped drastically. Someone opened 2 credit cards and a personal loan under your social security number. And yes, your son forged your signature on the second mortgage. The betrayal felt like a knife. My own son, the one who claimed to be protecting me, had destroyed my financial credibility. The doorbell rang just as I was staring at the damage in Marcus's email. Through the window, I saw Claire's car in my driveway. She stood on the porch, clutching a small gift bag and wearing a nervous smile. Mom Anderson, she said softly. When I opened the door, I hope I'm not interrupting. I brought you something from Vermont. A peace offering. Inside the bag was a snow globe of a quaint Vermont inn and a card with neat handwriting. Thinking of you, Patricia. How thoughtful. I set the trinket on the table and motioned for Claire to sit. Coffee? I asked, actually, she said. Hesitantly, perching on the edge of the sofa, I was hoping we could talk. About the house and other things. She twisted her hands in her lap. I owe you an apology. Patricia and I may have overreacted. It's just Daniel has been under so much stress lately, and when you bought this villa without telling him, he fell apart. Stress? I asked, narrowing my eyes. Stress about what, Claire? Her polished smile flickered. Work, money, you know how he is. I leaned forward, my voice sharp. How long have you known about Daniels? Financial problems? Her face went pale. What financial problems? The debt, the mortgage, the forged signatures. The loans taken out in my name? She froze. The color drained completely from her cheeks. I I don't know what you're talking about, but her trembling hands told me otherwise. She knew. She knew everything. Claire, I said coldly, Daniel has been stealing from me. And every time Patricia has one of her miraculous emergencies, it lines up perfectly with his financial disasters. That's not coincidence. That's a pattern. Her composure shattered. He didn't mean for it to go this far. It started with one credit card, just to get through a rough patch. Then Patricia's treatments came up, and Daniel felt responsible. Treatments? I snapped. What treatments? Patricia has excellent insurance. Not for the specialists. Not for the experimental therapies, Daniel believed. He thought if he helped, she would recover. I stared at her in disbelief. Claire, do you even hear yourself? Patricia has manipulated both of you for years, and my son has ruined his life and mine funding her lies. Claire shook her head violently. No, Patricia would never. She's like a mother to me. I stood, my anger boiling. No, Claire, she's not a mother. She's a predator. And if Daniel can't see it yet, then I will make sure the truth comes out. Claire backed toward the door, her voice breaking. You're wrong. You're not thinking clearly. The stress, the isolation, it's making you paranoid. She fled, leaving behind the snow globe and a silence heavy with betrayal. For a long moment, I stood in my living room, staring out at the ocean. My son had committed fraud. My daughter-in-law had enabled it. And Patricia Harris was the spider, at the center of this web. But I wasn't going to let them destroy me, not now. Not ever. The morning after Claire's nervous visit, I called Marcus again. My voice was calm, but edged with steel. Marcus, I need you to investigate Patricia Harris. Age around 70. Vermont address. I want everything: financial history, legal background, criminal records. He didn't ask questions. 2 hours later, the phone rang, and his voice was colder than I'd ever heard it. Rebecca. Patricia Harris isn't Patricia Harris at all. Her real name is Patricia Warren. She has a criminal record spanning 3 states. The air left my lungs. What kind of record? Elder fraud in Florida. Insurance fraud in North Carolina. Charges dismissed both times, but the pattern is clear. She's been running cons for over 20 years. Always the same playbook: insert herself into families with aging parents, create financial or medical crises, then drain resources until there's nothing left. I gripped the edge of the counter to steady myself and my son. She's been targeting him for at least 4 years. Based on your documents, it started in 2019, the same year Patricia's health emergencies began. I hung up and stood in my pristine kitchen, the Atlantic crashing beyond the glass. My son wasn't just reckless. He was a victim. But that didn't excuse the lies, the forged documents, the theft. Later that evening, Daniel called, his voice freed. Mom, I need to tell you something. You're going to hate me. Try me, I said. I've been taking money from your accounts, forging your signature, using your credit. I thought it was temporary, just until Patricia's treatments. We're covered. I didn't know how bad it had gotten. My heart cracked. How much, Daniel? Everything. Around 180,000. I was silent, letting the number hang like a noose. And you believed Patricia's story about experimental therapies? She showed me research, charts, promises of outcomes. I thought, she's not sick, Daniel. She's a con artist. His confusion was almost childlike. What are you talking about? I told him everything Marcus had found, the fake name, the arrests, the schemes in other states. His face went pale, his hands shaking as he buried them in his hair. That's impossible. She introduced me to Claire. She's been at every holiday, every family event. She introduced you and Claire? I asked sharply. At a financial planning conference in Boston, Claire was representing her company, and Patricia said we'd be perfect for each other. The pieces clicked into place with a sickening snap. What kind of conference? Estate planning. Senior financial services, right before Dad's diagnosis. Oh, God. My chest tightened. Daniel, don't you see? Patricia targeted our family. She knew I'd inherit. She knew you'd have access to my finances. She placed Claire in your life. He shook his head violently. No, Claire doesn't know. She can't know. Are you sure? I pressed. Because Patricia didn't just pick a random girl off the street. Claire was part of the plan. Before he could answer, we heard the sound of a car pulling into the driveway. Claire walked in moments later, her smile tight, her hands gripping shopping bags. Mom Anderson, what a surprise, she said sweetly. How nice to see you here. Her voice was too bright, her eyes too nervous. And for the first time, Daniel looked at her not with blind trust, but with suspicion. That night, long after I returned home, I sat in the dark, scrolling through Claire's social media. At first glance, her life seemed perfectly normal. 5 years of smiling family photos, vacations, dinners, holidays. But the deeper I looked, the stranger it became. There were no pictures from the early months of her relationship with Daniel. No casual snapshots, no dating milestones. Their history online began abruptly in late 2019, already polished, already staged. And in every photo, Patricia was there smiling in the background, her hand on Claire's shoulder, her presence woven tightly into every moment. I turned to Patricia's old Facebook page next. It claimed she had lived in Vermont her whole life, but her tagged locations told a different story. Florida, North Carolina, Georgia, each connected to different families she had once adopted. Pictures showed her celebrating Christmas with one family, graduations with another, birthdays with yet another. Always smiling, always beloved, always at the center until the photos stopped. And she moved on. Then came the discovery that froze my blood. Marcus's next call was short and devastating. Rebecca, I think Claire isn't who she says she is. Her real name is Sarah Warren, Patricia's daughter. The world seemed to tilt. Claire, my daughter-in-law, the woman Daniel thought he loved, was Patricia's child. The two of them had been running cons together for years. Daniel hadn't married a partner. He had married the enemy. It was a quiet evening at the villa. The waves rolled steady against the rocks, the sky painted in streaks of orange. For a brief moment, I almost believed life could return to normal. Then my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. I answered and heard the smooth, chilling voice I had come to despise. Hello, Rebecca. Patricia, or rather, Patricia Warren. You've been busy? She continued, her tone almost amused. I'm impressed. Most families don't put the pieces together until it's far too late. My grip tightened on the phone. How many families have you done this to? She laughed softly. Does it matter? What matters is that you and I have unfinished business. There's nothing left to discuss, I said coldly. Oh, but there is. You've created a problem for me. The police involvement, the frozen accounts, the investigation, it complicates things for Sarah and me. So here's what you're going to do. You're going to make it right. My heart pounded, but I kept my voice steady. And how exactly? Do you think I'll do that? You'll call off the investigation? You'll unfreeze the accounts. And you'll prepare a cashier's check for $3 million as a gesture of goodwill. I almost laughed. You think I pay you? After everything you've done? Her voice dropped, sharp as a blade. If you don't, I release certain information about your late husband's business, tax evasion, shell companies, illegal income hidden for 15 years, documents that would ruin his reputation and yours. and possibly land Daniel in prison. The room spun. You're bluffing. Am. I. Did you never wonder why your husband left you such a large estate? Why some investments seem too good to be true? Rebecca, I have the files. I can prove everything. The IRS will eat you alive. You're lying, I whispered, though a cold memory surfaced the nights I watched my husband pore over documents he never explained. The way he grew restless near the end, afraid of something he wouldn't name. Patricia's voice softened into mock sympathy. I know you, Rebecca. You'll sacrifice anything to protect Daniel. Even now, you'd rather pay me than watch him destroyed. 3 million. That's the price of silence. My hands shook as I ended the call. For a long moment, I stood frozen, staring out at the ocean. The woman they had trained to be invisible would have paid. She would have written the check, buried the truth, and carried the shame. Alone? But I wasn't that woman anymore. I picked up the phone again, this time dialing Detective Rodriguez at the Financial Crimes Unit. Detective, I said, my voice steady now. Patricia Warren just attempted blackmail. She demanded 3 million to keep quiet about my husband's past. I think it's time we set a trap. The trap was simple but precise. Rodriguez arranged for me to wear a recording device during Patricia's next call. Surveillance teams prepared at 3 possible locations she might use to collect the money. All I had to do was play my part, but before we could move, I had to tell Daniel the truth. That night, we sat in my living room, the fire crackling softly as I revealed what I had hidden for years. Your father wasn't as clean as you thought, I admitted. He had income. He used shell companies. He was terrified the IRS would find out. I only discovered the truth near the end when it was too late to undo. Daniel's face went pale. Are we going to prison, Mom? I shook my head. I don't know. But I do know this. We won't pay Patricia a single cent. If consequences come, we'll face them honestly. Together. He covered his face with his hands. I signed so many documents for Dad, I didn't even read half of them. What if, then? We'll fight, I said firmly. But we will not let her control us. The next evening, Patricia called exactly on schedule, with a recording device humming beneath my blouse and Rodriguez listening from another room. I answered. Well, Rebecca, Patricia purred. Have you made your decision? I have, I said calmly. The answer is no. Silence. Then, her voice sharp with fury. You don't understand the consequences? Oh, I understand them perfectly, I replied. You'll expose my husband's past. You'll drag Daniel into it. You might even succeed in ruining our reputation. But here's the thing, Patricia, you made one mistake. You assumed I care more about appearances than I do about my dignity. You were wrong. And with that, I hung up Dot for the first time in years. I felt truly free. The following day, everything was set. Detective Rodriguez and her team had wired my phone and prepared surveillance at 3 possible pickup sites. All I had to do was let Patricia dig her own grave. Dot, she called right on schedule. Have you reconsidered, Rebecca? She asked smoothly. I have, I said, keeping my voice steady. But the answer is still no. She launched into her threats again, boasting about her leverage and my family's secrets. Every word was captured, every syllable stored as evidence. When she finally hung up, Rodriguez smiled grimly. We've got her. Within 48 hours, Patricia attempted to move. She and Claire Sarah Warren tried to push through forged power of attorney documents at my bank, attempting to siphon millions into an offshore account. They didn't realize the fraud protection system had already flagged the attempt. The moment they tried again, federal agents closed in. But even as the authorities hunted them, the fallout of Patricia's blackmail landed hard on our family. The documents she'd threatened to release, she sent them anyway. The IRS received proof of my husband's shell companies, Local reporters received copies too. Suddenly, Daniel and I were sitting in a lawyer's office, staring down years of unpaid taxes, penalties, and audits. It was brutal. I ended up paying nearly 1.8 million in back taxes and fines. Daniel was questioned for weeks, lawyers pressing him about every signature, every authorization he had ever placed on his father's paperwork. His attorney argued that he had signed without full knowledge, manipulated by both his father and later by Patricia. Eventually, the case against him weakened. But through it all, something unexpected happened. For the first time in years, Daniel and I sat together, not as a mother to be managed and a son playing protector, but as equals. We shared truths we had both kept hidden. I admitted my silence about his father's crimes. He confessed the guilt and shame he carried for stealing from me. One evening, as we sat on the deck watching the sun sink into the Atlantic, he finally broke down. "I'm sorry, Mom, for everything. For treating you like you couldn't handle your own life, for stealing, for believing Patricia over you." I placed my hand over his. "And I'm sorry for keeping secrets about your father, for letting Patricia's lies destroy your confidence. We both made mistakes. But we're still here, and we're going to fight back." It was the most honest conversation we'd had since his father's death. The first time I felt like my son truly saw me, not as someone to protect or manage, but as a woman who still had strength left in her. Meanwhile, Rodriguez called with news. "Patricia and Sarah are on the run," she said. "They tried to slip across the border. We're working with international authorities. It's only a matter of time." That night, I poured myself a glass of wine and stood on my deck, the ocean stretching endless before me. For once, the weight of fear was gone. Yes, I had paid dearly. Yes, my family name was scarred. But the power Patricia once held was broken, and more importantly, my son and I were no longer strangers. We were allies. 3 months later, the call finally came. Detective Rodriguez's voice carried a rare hint of satisfaction. "We found them, Rebecca." Patricia and Sarah were arrested in Mexico. They were already running the same con on a wealthy family in Guadalajara. The Mexican authorities picked them up, and they'll be extradited back to face charges here. My breath released in a rush. I hadn't realized I was holding. What kind of charges? Wire fraud, identity theft, extortion, conspiracy. If convicted, they'll serve serious prison time. And the money? We recovered around $400,000 from various accounts. Not everything, but enough to prove their operation. The rest, I'm afraid, is gone. Gone. Just like the years of trust they had stolen from my son. Daniel's life unraveled quickly after the arrests. The evidence against Sarah was undeniable. Bank transfers into accounts under Patricia's name, hidden credit lines, photographs of our family. Assets, all of it carefully documented. The final blow was a letter, handwritten by Sarah herself, bragging about how easily Daniel trusted her and how much she and Patricia could squeeze from my inheritance. When Daniel read it, his face went white, his hands shaking. "She never loved me," he whispered. "No," I said gently. "She never did. She loved the access you gave her." The divorce was finalized in record time. Sarah didn't contest a thing. How could she, when she was awaiting extradition in shackles? Daniel sold the house that carried too many lies and too much pain. With my encouragement, he bought a smaller, quieter place closer to my villa. A fresh start. Is for me. I kept the waterfront villa. Not because I needed its space or its luxury, but because it symbolized something greater. It was the line in the sand I had drawn, the moment I had stopped shrinking to fit other people's comfort, the place where I had reclaimed my voice. One evening, Daniel came to visit. We sat together on the deck, the sky painted crimson by the setting sun. He turned to me, his expression softer than I'd seen in years. You know, Mom, he said quietly, I think I finally understand. You weren't being reckless. You weren't losing control. You were showing all of us that you're still here, that you're not someone to be managed or hidden away. You're you. For the first time in a long while, I smiled without hesitation. That's all I ever wanted, Daniel. To be seen. The sound of the waves filled the silence between us, steady and strong. Just like us, Patricia and Sarah's empire had collapsed. Their lies were exposed. And for the first time in years, the Anderson family wasn't defined by manipulation or secrecy, but by survival. We had been broken, yes. But we weren't finished, not by a long shot. A year has passed since the storm broke. I wake each morning in my villa overlooking the Atlantic, sunlight spilling across the ocean and into my room. The house no longer feels like an active rebellion. It feels like home. Daniel visits twice a week now. Sometimes we share coffee on the deck, sometimes long walks by the shore, sometimes quiet moments where no words are needed at all. Our bond has been rebuilt not on guilt or obligation, but on honesty. Patricia and Sarah are gone, their empire of lies dismantled. Last I heard, both were serving time, their names dragged through courts instead of paraded through family celebrations. The money they stole will never all be recovered, but that no longer matters. What they took in dollars, I gained tenfold in clarity. I travel now. I take art classes, wander museums, sit at cafes with friends who know me as Rebecca, not just Daniel's mother, not just a widow, not just someone to be managed. I laugh more. I breathe deeper. I feel alive in a way I hadn't since I was a girl. And I've learned something important. Dignity isn't something you buy or something others grant you. It's something you claim. You seize it the moment you stop letting people define your worth, the moment you refuse to shrink yourself, to make others comfortable. For years, I was invisible in my own family, a forgotten birthday, a convenient afterthought. But the villa, the choice to say yes to myself, changed everything. It wasn't just a house. It was a declaration. I exist, I matter, and I will not be silenced. Now, at 65. I am no longer waiting for permission, not from Daniel, not from Patricia, not from anyone. Sometimes the best revenge isn't anger or payback. Sometimes the best revenge is refusing to stay small in a world that tries to shrink you. And this life I've built is my proof.